seat license. Seat right here. All right, bring him on in. Thanks, Joe. Be seated, please.
Ladies and gentlemen of this jury, I'm not going to do like defense, wait an hour, 15 minutes to mention the victims of this horrible, horrific massacre. Joe Perez Jr., Taurean Sanderlin, Akilah Dasilva, DeEbony Groves, Sharita Henderson, Shanita Waggoner, Kayla Shaw, a name that defense left off curiously, James Shaw Jr. That's what this case is about. It's not about Travis Reinking, no matter how much they want to spend time talking about his thoughts, his feelings. It's about what he did to them, the lives that he took from them. These are people who loved and were loved back. This is a man who wished he had that. Instead, he went to that Waffle House. This time, he said, I would punish them by taking something they couldn't take back, some of their lives. Those are his words. Those are the words of a murderer, a man who would kill 4 innocent people, a man who will walk into a restaurant full of people who are just trying to enjoy life, who come there from various different locations, meeting by happen chance. That's what he did. Travis Reinking committed 4 acts of murder, 4 acts of attempted first-degree murder. This isn't about what he feels about it. It's about what he did. You've seen the video of him arriving at the Waffle House, and what you will see when you get it in evidence, when you get the chance, is that he sits there and he waits. He's not waiting for a sign. He's waiting to give himself the courage. You've heard him describe his feelings in that moment. He's trying to talk himself into it. You've heard the testimony. This is a man who you've heard wrote about wanting to commit mass murder in the past. You heard the testimony of Dr. Eisen. She read his journals. He's at a Nelly concert wanting to pull out a .30-06 rifle and be a sniper, shooting people, innocent people trying to enjoy a concert. As he sat there in that truck for those minutes, as Joe Perez is going back to his car to check on it, as DeEbony and Sharita are walking into the Waffle House, as Akilah and Shantia and Abede and Alexis are sitting there waiting on their food, as Kayla is sitting in the car with her girlfriends, her cousins, after a night out, waiting on their food, as James Shaw Jr. and his friend Brennan, his best friend, are walking in, laughing, talking about how high the plates are being stacked. what he's thinking, what this evidence in this case has shown to you, he's thinking about wanting to carry out an act that he has wrote about, thought about, and is now on the verge of doing, and he's torn. He's conflicted because he knows it's evil. He knows it's unholy. He knows it's unclean. He knows that he will feel wrong when he does it. These are the words that he described about it after the fact. He knows that. He just wants the courage. This is a man with no courage, though, because he can't even come in here and tell you that he will accept responsibility. No sympathy has he given to these families. No remorse. None. This is a man who, April 22nd, 2018, took so much. He took so much from them. He robbed Joe Perez Sr. of ever meeting Joe Perez III. Robbed the Groves family of ever hearing DeEbony sing Jesus Loves Me Ever Again, the last time she sang it, as she sat there in that booth at the Waffle House. Robbed Abede of being able to truly enjoy the celebration of the music video that he had just made with his little brother that same day. Robbed Taurean Sanderlin of ever achieving his dream of being a chef or cooking Thanksgiving dinner ever again with his aunt and the rest of his family. This is a man who took so much, and yet he sits here today and asks of you not to take his liberty. His attorney says this is a man who doesn't deserve prison. This is a man who deserves to be found guilty. Guilty. 16 times when you get to the verdict form, you should be saying guilty. Nothing else. You've seen the evidence. You've heard the testimony. You've heard the witnesses come in here. We spent one day talking about the victims and what he did. The rest of the time we've been spending talking about him. And that's unfair. It's not right. It's as wrong as Travis Reinking knew he was on that day. He knew he was wrong. He knew what he was doing. Mental illness is not an excuse. That's not just me saying it. That's not just General Moore saying it. That is what the judge is going to instruct you on. It alone is not an excuse. So what if he has a mental illness? That isn't enough. Travis Reinking isn't the only person that's got problems, struggles, issues that he's got to overcome. He ain't the only person who's got something difficult to deal with, that thinks he's been dealt a bad deal. So what? This man knew right from wrong. This is a 29-year-old man who worked a job as a crane worker, had thousands of dollars at his disposal to go and buy silver bars so he can flee. He had his own truck. You heard him talking about how he wants to paint it and do all these things to it. His own apartment. It doesn't matter that he had a mental illness. That's not enough. That's not what the law says. The law says defense, and the defense alone had to prove to you by clear and convincing evidence that on that day, when he walked into that Waffle House, when he stepped out of his truck and pulled that assault rifle and pointed it at Joe Perez Jr., who was just trying to walk into the Waffle House, and shot him, and shot him, and shot him, and then saw Taurean running and shot him, shot him as he ran for his life, saying, I'm not going to shoot him in the head yet because I want him to have a little time to get right with God and maybe feel as bad as I have, and continued to shoot him. Then came back to Joe, whose body lay there on the ground, shot him again. That's malice. That's somebody who knows what they're doing. Just a malicious person, vicious person, evil person. There's no way he didn't know that what he was doing was wrong. He knew it. You heard testimony from doctors, 2 of them. They came in, they gave their statements, and one thing that was very clear is that they didn't give this case the respect that it was due. When you took an oath as jurors in this case, you took a solemn oath to pay close attention to all of the facts and the evidence in this case. Pay close attention. That's not what these doctors did. They overlooked things that they had access to. They ignored certain things. They picked certain things that they wanted to pick and choose instead of picking everything. Dr. Wood told you that she only met with Travis Reinking one time and discussed the incident. One time. And yet she comes to you and tells you that she can come to a conclusion about his actions on that day. She spoke to him once. The next time that she wanted to speak to him, she wanted to give him a malingering test. A test to determine whether or not he was faking having mental illness or perhaps exaggerating that he had mental illness. And what did he do? He said, I'm not taking that test. It's okay. Travis Reinking special. Yes. She told you when she looked at the reports, the medical records that helped form the basis of her opinion, that what she saw was a prior time that he'd gone to a hospital. And if you remember, if you listen closely, one of the things that he did then was say, I don't want to participate in this. It's a man who makes choices. He doesn't want to do things that he doesn't want to do. He refused a malingering test with Dr. Wood. Then he goes to see Dr. Eisen. Dr. Eisen gives him one test. Of course, he likes her. She's friendly with him. It's a man with no girlfriend, no friends at all. And here you have this woman who's coming to sit down with him every day, twice a week. Sit with him for an hour and a half and talk through his feelings. And he's starting to have affection for her. He starts to find her attractive. He's calling her beautiful. No big deal to her. It was a big deal to him, having this person who comes and sits down with him, a man with no friends. Now he's got somebody who's paying all the attention in the world to him. So he agrees to a test. But once he takes the first one, once he knows what the test is, never takes another one. Never. And so now you have 2 doctors who've come to you and testified with certainty that this man has not exaggerated in any way his symptoms, and yet they only administered one test to him. Well, Dr. Eisen, why did you want to keep administering tests? General Norman asked, if you didn't think it was necessary. Well, of course she thought it was necessary. She just let him make his own decisions. That's what they have done in this case. They decided to pick and choose amongst what words they wanted to believe of his. You heard his testimony, their testimony, Dr. Wood, in which we went through a long list of things that would be an indicator of wrongfulness. Fleeing from the police. It can be. Hiding out. It can be. Trying to disguise yourself. It can be. Describing your actions as evil. It can be. This is the testimony not of an unbiased person, but of an advocate. When she took that stand in this trial, she decided to become his advocate and not an unbiased witness. Perhaps in her other cases, she has not been so conflicted. But in this one, for whatever reason, it's clear from the evidence and the testimony that she was. Dr. Eisen, same questions. If you describe your actions as evil, are they an indicator of wrongfulness? Now, you, ladies and gentlemen of this jury, know that evil is as wrong as can be. And that's how he described his actions. And of course, Dr. Eisen reluctantly agrees that if you describe your actions as evil, then indeed you do understand that what you have done is wrong. But it was reluctant. Why is that? Perhaps she refuses to back down from the mistakes that she made in her evaluation, overlooking certain aspects of the reports that were given to her. Defense told you that three doctors at MTMHI signed off on her opinion. You only heard from one. I didn't see Dr. Feist walk in that door and testify and be subjected to cross-examination, or at the very least verify that that was his opinion. In fact, to the contrary, what you heard the testimony was that Dr. Feist worked out of a different location. There was no testimony that he actually met with Travis Reinking. That's not a supported opinion. Dr. Kovacs. Dr. Kovacs could have easily come in this courtroom for defense if they thought he was going to provide them with valuable testimony. Where was he? The only evidence that you heard about Dr. Kovacs is that when he was conducting the evaluation with Travis Reinking, he grew increasingly concerned that Travis Reinking had not committed this crime because he had been commanded by God, but because he was acting out of revenge, and therefore, at the time, wasn't certain that he could support the opinion that Dr. Eisen ultimately came to. So it's not three doctors. It's one doctor from MTMHI, Dr. Eisen. Dr. Eisen, who can't even tell you which reports and journals she reviewed. Dr. Eisen, who couldn't even tell you, she didn't even look at the video. Now, that was just yesterday, so I know you know how the state feels about that. But I want you to understand, how is it that you can give your expert opinion about someone's actions if you haven't even looked at the actions? When we asked them, well, you're an expert witness. You can sit in this courtroom. You could have watched the trial. They didn't even have to come to the courthouse. There's a camera right there. They could have cut it on while they were in their office doing their own business and listened to the testimony. They didn't even care enough to do that. Didn't even care enough to hear the testimony of the eyewitnesses. Uninterested in that. And yet, they have an expert opinion based on limited conversations with Travis Reinking, based on him saying that he had been commanded by God. Or was it self-defense? Or had he been baited by the FBI and the CIA into tricking him? Or was it the aliens? You know, there was also the thing where he's fighting in some war with the aliens. It can't be all of them. They're trying to say it's every single one of them. If you're acting out of self-defense, you don't need a command from God. James Shaw Jr. didn't tell you that he needed God to tell him to fight back. He told you that he saw Travis Reinking coming through that door, and at that moment, it was his time to fight back because it was going to be his life or Travis Reinking's. So he had to move him out the way. He didn't need a command from God. Travis Reinking didn't need a command from God. My question to you is, how is it that a man who has planned to commit an act, planned to kill people, tell you that the only reason he did so is because he was commanded? How is it that a man who has spent so much time writing and thinking about mass murder can tell you that the only reason that he committed a mass murder is because he was commanded to? God didn't have nothing to do with that. That was Travis Reinking, every single bit of it. God didn't tell him to take a Bushmaster XM15 assault rifle. He had 4 guns, 4 of them. He could have picked any one. Every single one of them guns would have killed people, but he didn't pick the other guns. He picked the gun that could inflict the most damage. He picked the gun that could shoot the most rapidly. He picked the gun that would shoot with high velocity and cause the bullets to act like they were exploding, leaving Sharita and Shantia with injuries consistent with having been in a military battle. But really, they were just at a Waffle House. He made those choices when he picked that gun. Defense says to you, well, he was naked, and a naked man can't disguise himself. You heard the testimony of the eyewitnesses. Kayla Shaw cowering in between the stools and the counter. What did she say to you? She looked up and all she could see was his naked private area. That's the thing that stole her attention. She never got to his face. James Shaw didn't say, I can identify Travis Reinking. He got in a fight with the man. What was the testimony? He gave a description: white man, blonde hair, naked. Not his face, because the nakedness distracts. Now, every plan, every criminal is not the world-class criminal you see in some movie that is doing a heist and never gets caught. Even some of the smartest people in America get caught. They're running Fortune 500 companies doing these schemes behind the scenes, and we never know, and they get caught and prosecuted and sent to prison. Travis Reinking is a person with delusions of grandeur. He thinks he's smarter than you. He believes he knows better than you. And so that he created a plan that still led to him getting caught does not absolve him of responsibility. He was very clear that it was his plan to go to the Waffle House. Very clear that it was his plan to kill as many people there. Very clear that it was his plan to get into his truck and leave. Very clear that he was going to go to another Waffle House and kill some more people. That was his plan. Very clear that he was going to commit mass murder. Self-defense. Against who? What you heard was that the only issue he may have even possibly had with people at Waffle House happened over some hash browns in Caryville, Tennessee, at some point, who knows when before. And yet, Joe Perez didn't work at the Waffle House. See, now, if you were to tell me that Travis Reinking walked past Joe Perez, walked around the corner, and killed some people, I would still have an immense problem with that. I might still be standing here, but I'd have a little less solid of an argument. That's not what he did. He killed Joe first. Killed him. Then after he killed Taurean, he walked in and never went to the area where the Waffle House employees were. He didn't go left. He went right. That was his choice. There's no question that DeEbony Groves and Sharita Henderson were not Waffle House employees as they cowered, hoping that they could play dead underneath that table. No doubt. And yet, he killed them anyways. What did Sharita say? She tried to play dead, and then she opened her eyes. And in a moment, she looked at him. How terrifying it must have been. How frightening it must have been to see this man standing over her, that big gun that had already killed people. And then he looked her dead in the eye and shot her. Not once, 3 times. This is a man who is evil. He knew what he was doing. He knew it was evil. And yet he comes to you and tells you he didn't know it was wrong. We have no burden to prove when it comes to the insanity defense. None. Defense says we should give you a motive. We don't have to give you a motive. We didn't have to put on any evidence, especially after the testimony of those doctors. We did put on some evidence because we've taken this case as serious as possible, because that's what it demands. The reality is Travis Reinking decided that he wanted to punish people because his life was miserable. And misery loves company. So that's what he brought, misery and despair on that day. The reason that he wanted to exact that misery is because he had decided that his life had been so unfulfilling, unhappy. He wanted to make a change, move out west to Colorado, walk around and see the beautiful vistas, hang out with some friends, some actual friends. He said, enjoy the finer things in life. To me, nothing was better than doing a couple puffs of marijuana out of glass pipe or loud and going for a long walk down the bike trail in Salida. That was my happy place, in the mountain air, surrounded by an incredible view of nature and feeling like you are witnessing it for the very first time in life. It was glorious. It's a dream. It's really what he wants. His life is not going well here. He doesn't like his job. He doesn't have any friends. He doesn't like himself. He's concerned that maybe he's struggling with his sexuality, struggling with whether or not he's even a man or transsexual. And that makes him angry and agitated. And he acts out. He decided, I'm going to act out. I'm going to take a BMW, change my life. I'm going to go out there. What does he say? I'm going to take this BMW and I'm going to live a good life. So he's going to buy houses, or repossess them is his term. We know that's his term for theft, for stealing, carjacking. He's going to live this great life out there, driving in nearly $100,000 car. And of course, because see, he thinks he's smarter than he is, that he's smarter than you, smarter than these doctors, and maybe he outsmarted them in this particular instance. Because he thinks he's smarter than you, he thought that he was going to get away with it. it isn't because of the mental illness. It's because the man thinks that he's got delusions of grandeur. I mean, this is somebody who thinks that Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande are so interested in him. Not that they just want to have sex with him, but that they would want to rape him. Yeah, whatever. He's got a mental illness, but the mental illness is not the reason he did this. He wanted to go out there and change his life. And so when he came back home that night, came back home from picking up his old truck that he obviously parked somewhere surreptitiously such that the police couldn't find it by the BMW dealership. When he got home and saw the police out there, he started to get angry. First thing he said was, he's tried to sneak into his apartment. Made sure he had his gun, just in case he needed to kill a couple cops, I guess. Snuck into his apartment, went upstairs, tells the doctors that he went up there and went to sleep, but was worried somebody might want to come talk to him. What he writes is that he has a rifle trained on them outside, as they're outside doing their job. Thankfully, former officer Caleb Andrews didn't go knock on his door. Wouldn't have been able to be here to testify. He said that over the next couple of days, he got angrier, yelled, screamed, mad. And so by the time we get to April 22nd, he's already well into formulating and carrying out his plan. Well into it. In reality, the plan started well before the BMW. April the 8th, he goes and gets 2 extra magazines. What do you need with 2 extra magazines? You've already got 1 magazine that carries 30 rounds. Why do you need 60 more at your ready? It's part of his plan. April 10th, he goes to get the silver bars. $1,700 worth of silver bars. Why? So he can make easy exchange without having to use a credit card or having to use a check. So you can walk into one of those coin and currency somewhere, lay down one of those silver bars, and get cash money from it. So he had cash money in his wallet, $400 and something. So he's making a plan. The BMW was part of the plan. He picks up the silver bars on the 20th. He's ready to go. He's got his go bag. He's got his water. Got his pistol. He's got his silver now. And so now it's time to make a run somewhere else. But the car is taken. She learned. That was a testimony. And he got upset. And so he drove to that Waffle House, angry, because he wanted to exact the same kind of pain and suffering that he felt on others. And if nothing else, anybody who wants to inflict pain and suffering, they know they are wrong. Plain and simple. I asked Dr. Wood, does he know what the term punishment means? Yes. He understands that punishment means to inflict suffering in retaliation. Yes. If you're acting in retaliation, then you understand that it is wrong. Yes. That was Dr. Wood's testimony. That means he knew he was wrong. Dr. Eisen, General Norman asked, if he knew he was acting in retaliation, then that means he knew he was wrong. Yes. So then he has an appreciation for his wrongfulness. Absolutely has an appreciation for his wrongfulness. These expert witnesses are not the final deciders in this case. You are. You can reject it altogether. Just throw it out. Act as if they didn't even come in here and testify. Honestly, that's what the rules say. You could accept some parts. Say, well, I believe he's got a mental illness. I saw the video. He's got a mental illness. But the rest of it, you don't have to take any of that. Throw it out. Based on their inability, unwillingness to do a meticulous and careful evaluation such that these victims deserved. I want you to recall that in Dr. Ison's testimony, one of the things she didn't quite want to acknowledge is that she reviewed a journal in which he said he was writing a book in a way such that whoever read it would question his sanity. And he said that he wanted to get the book published before he started killing police officers, so that if they killed him, he would be a martyr. This is a man who is planning murder. He wants to carry out murder. You will read in his journal how he describes committing the murder, how he talks about it isn't how I thought it was going to be. Talks about how the blood was spraying in a way that he didn't expect or anticipate. Talks about how his skin was tingling. This is a man who knows right from wrong, completely and utterly understands it. Defense talked about the fact that a BMW sales lady said that he, in her brief interaction, may have reminded her of a friend. Well, you heard the testimony of several police officers, all of them who have been actually trained, not someone who has had an experience with one friend, trained experiences. They know how to interact with individuals who are experiencing symptoms of schizophrenia and know who they're supposed to call, know how they act. To a person, they testified that didn't happen with Travis Reinking. Not at all. Not one bit. These are the people who were interacting with him 34 hours after the shooting. Not one woman who had one experience with one friend. But they didn't want to highlight the fact that she said also in her testimony that he had moments of clarity. He was very clear. I'm taking this car. It's coming with me. He was very clear that if she didn't get out of that car, she too was coming with him. Thankfully, she did. Otherwise, who knows what could have happened? Maybe that baby bump she was rubbing in her testimony might not be with her. Defense said that choices are based on perception. What about Joe Perez Jr. could have forced him to perceive him in any way as a threat to him? He didn't describe Joe Perez Jr. as an alien, as someone else in the alien army. That's not what he says. He called him a target. Why did he call him a target? Well, it wasn't just to dehumanize him. It's because he read or watched a video online in which he said the military say the easiest way to make it easier to kill people, it's not call them people, call them targets. That's understanding wrongfulness, right? If you're able to say, I'm going to kill somebody, but in order to make it easier for me to do it, I have to rob them not only of their life, but their humanity in the process. You understand that what you are doing is wrong. He knew it was wrong. You'll read his journal. He says that after he kills Joe and Taurean, after, as you see in the video, he casually steps over Joe's body as he's laying there on the ground. He says, well, gone this far. Might as well keep going. Keep killing people. That's somebody who understands that it is wrong. And that's the only standard that you have in here that you really need to consider, right? Is it clear and convincing that he didn't know what he was doing was wrong? Of course he did. Both the doctors essentially said it. They didn't want to completely walk back their testimony because they signed a report and didn't want to come across as unprofessional, I guess. But in reality, that was their testimony. He knew it was wrong. Defense says they have sympathy for the victims. I suppose words are an expression of sympathy, perhaps. But I can't tell that Travis Reinking has any sympathy for these people. How did he recreate it? When he created these drawings on a styrofoam plates a year later, drawing them as stick figures, targets again. He's dehumanizing them again. He's showing that he's killed them, which means he has an absolute appreciation of the nature of his conduct. And he's taking away their humanity, knowing that he killed people, which I submit to you is also an appreciation of his wrongfulness. Travis Reinking had a plan. He absolutely had a plan. And it was clear from the moment he walked into that, the moment he walked out of his apartment. See, there was a question as to why he might have a jacket on while he was naked. We already discussed why he was naked. Distracts. Why do you have a jacket? Well, if he's naked, he can't carry extra rounds. He needs pockets. See, that's part of his plan. But see, as he sat there with these 90 rounds, he had to fill them up. He had to fill it up. Joe Perez Jr. Taurean Sanderlin. Akilah Dasilva. Shanita Waggoner. DeEbony Groves. Sharita Henderson. James Shaw Jr. Well, he may have had another one for James Shaw Jr. That was his plan. There's a famous boxer, Mike Tyson, you know him. Probably heard the phrase. Every man has a plan until he gets punched in the mouth. He wasn't ready for him. He didn't know who was behind that door. He expected that when he went behind that bathroom door, he was going to have nothing but fish in a barrel, target practice, killing him. And behind that door was a man who was waiting to punch him in the mouth and disarm him and move him out of the way and get him out of that Waffle House and stop him from committing more murders at that Waffle House and the next Waffle House. That's what changed things. That's why he fled. He didn't flee because he wanted to. He fled because James Shaw moved him out the way. He pushed him out of there. He didn't think about that. And so as he went back to his apartment, which curiously was left unlocked, how else did he get in there, right? He took a shower. You saw James Shaw, he had blood on his hand, blood got on the gun, blood from his arms. What was he washing off? The blood. What's he do? He puts clothes on. He's no longer the naked man, now he's got clothes on. He puts his clothes on, he grabs his go bag, and he gets out of there. When? Dr. Ison, when he heard the sirens, the police sirens that were coming for him in appreciation of wrongfulness. When did he get out of there? According to Dr. Wood, when he heard the sirens because they were coming for him in appreciation for wrongfulness. And what did he do? He hid for 34 hours. According to him, he hid underneath a house until some dog came sniffing around and heard and maybe thought he might get found. And according to him, he wanted to go hotwire a car and steal it to assist in his flee, his departure, his escape from justice. Didn't work out. Eventually he does get seen hiding out in the thick brush of the woods out there in an undeveloped portion of Antioch. And an officer walks up on him, and according to him, the first thing that he does, he finds some cover, Travis Reinking. He gives it some thought. He reaches like he's gonna reach for his gun. His gun is now in the backpack. He's just spent a day and a half underneath a house. Kind of hard to lay there with the gun on your hip. So it's not there anymore. But he thinks about shooting that officer. Then he realizes, I'm caught. There's nothing I can do. And he submits. He's making an assessment about the value of his life, one that he didn't make about the value of the lives of these wonderful young people who were killed. And he continues to submit to these officers. Never once. You saw the officer Corman. She might not have been much taller than this, right? And she told you he was half a body taller than him. You've seen this man stand up. Look at these big guards in here. These are big, strong men. He's bigger than them. He didn't try to flee out of here, did he? Not once. You didn't see that. He didn't try to run from that cop as she gracefully guided him with one arm, because that's all that she had to do, right? He didn't try to run from, he didn't try to fight with the nurse as she forces a catheter up his urethra. Nothing. One of the corporals says, I was around him twice a week. Twice a week, never an issue. This is a man who now claims, that these doctors now claim he's got this grand conspiracy, that he's afraid of the state. But when the guys with the guns who are actual state agents come for him, nothing but compliance. Nothing. That's because he understands wrongfulness. He knew what he was doing. He knew that it was wrong. He knew when to act in a way where he needed to be compliant, and he knew when he could act in a way where he could just be the murderous man that he wanted to be. Ladies and gentlemen of this jury, as I mentioned to you earlier, you took an oath to be fair, to be just, to consider the facts of this case, to do what's right. The evidence in this case is clear. He committed the murders. It certainly isn't clear that he didn't appreciate the wrongfulness when he committed the murders. So if you're going to do what's right based on the evidence that was in this case, the only right verdict, the only just verdict is guilty. Any other verdict would be as wrong as Travis Reinking was on April 22nd, 2018.